All right. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome. Glad you are here. It's fun to be with you, especially on a Friday. We can finish the week strong. So I got a great message to share with you this morning. If you're taking notes, I want you to write down this phrase: success has rules. And at the end of that, put a big old fat exclamation point. Success has rules. In fact, go ahead and underline that. Success has rules. See, I believe, guys and gals, that success really has rules. There are specific rules that if you follow them, you will be successful. For example, in real estate, so many people try to make real estate a mystery in terms of how to be successful. And yet, if I were to sit down with each and every one of you individually, and if we were to come up with a list of the rules in real estate, I know that you could do it. I know that even without prompting on my part, if I were to ask you, what would you have to do every single day in real estate to be successful? I am absolutely confident, stake my life on it, that you could come up with a very specific list of things that you would have to do every day consistently in order to be successful in real estate. In other words, what are the rules in real estate to be successful? And I think the same is true in every area of our life. So I just want you to think about this, because I'm going to pose a question to you. And then I want you to think about that question within the framework of this concept that I'm going to present to you. So the concept is this. It's called the three pillars. In every person's life, there are three primary supportive pillars that create the foundation for your life. Number one, the relationships that you're in. First and foremost, the relationship with yourself, as well as the relationship you have with your creator. And then the relationships that you have with anybody else, your spouse, your partner, your children, your parents, anybody else. And then it extends beyond that, further and further. So your relationships. Then the second pillar is your health, your mental, your physical, your emotional, your spiritual health. And then the third area is your finances, or in this case, since you're in business, we'll say your business. Those three areas are interdependent. One depends upon the other for strength. Let me just prove that point. We all know the name Tiger Woods. Well, Tiger Woods, I don't know, it's been 15 years ago or so. It's been a while. But Tiger Woods started to have a challenge in what area of his life, if we all remember the story? He started having challenges in the area of his relationship. Well, that challenge, or those challenges in his relationship, led to challenges in his health. He started to suffer mental and emotional challenges that led to physical challenges. And Tiger Woods, being at the top of his game, when he starts to have challenges with his mind, his mindset, as well as his emotions, and then also with his physical body, he's not able to perform at the level that he was used to. And so it started to affect, of course, his game, his business. So you can see that when you start to have a challenge in one area of life, it leads to challenges in areas that seemingly are not connected at all, because they are interdependent. You've seen this. When money is good, when you find a lot of money in your life, it affects you positively, mentally and emotionally, and you feel better. Not only do you feel better mentally and emotionally, but you start to feel better physically. Literally, physically, you feel better when you have more money. Well, when you start to feel better mentally, physically, and emotionally, of course, it has a very positive impact on your relationships in your life. I mean, think about that. Any of you who are the primary breadwinner, or where your income is absolutely necessary to support the household, when things are going well financially, how does your spouse feel about that? Are they happy about it? Are they disappointed? Are they angry? Are they excited? And of course, the answer is they're excited about it. They feel great about it. So just remember that each area of your life in what we call the three pillars is interdependent. Now, the reason I mention that is because it's important that we recognize that interdependency relative to this question. I want to ask you this question. I said I was going to pose a question to you that I want you to ponder as we have this conversation this morning, and really, quite frankly, beyond. It is this question: what are you no longer willing to accept in your life? So I want you to write that down. What am I no longer willing to accept in my life? And when you write that question down, I want you to think about it relative to those three areas: your relationships, your health, and then your business, or your finances, money. Now, I'm not expecting that you're going to come up with a bunch of answers right now. Some things may pop in your mind immediately, which is great. But the thing I'm going to challenge you to do is, outside of the time that we're going to spend together this morning, is to sit down and journal that and ask that question. What am I no longer willing to accept in my life? And then begin to identify specific things in each one of those categories, your relationships, your health, and in your business, that you're no longer willing to accept, that must change. See, the first thing that's important is that we recognize where we are and what needs to change. And that's really what I'm asking you to do. Take an assessment as to where you are. You know, we all have this expectation as to where we thought we would be at this point. So take that assessment. It's a moment of reckoning. Where am I? What is going on in my life that is no longer acceptable? That is not where I thought I was going to be. It is not acceptable. And therefore, I'm going to do something about it. And there's the key right there. I'm going to do something about it. That's where most people start to lose, I think, control or lose perspective on what to do next. You know, so many people at the beginning of a year set their New Year's resolutions. And the challenge is that less than 90% of, over 90% of people do not typically achieve their goal. It's fewer than 10% of people who set a New Year's goal who actually achieve the goal, which is really scary. But I'm here to tell you that the truth is that that doesn't have to be the case. Just because less than 10% of people achieve their New Year's goal doesn't mean that that's the way that it has to be. It's that way because people have forgotten that success has rules, that there are specific things that you have to do in order to be successful, including setting and achieving a goal. And that's what we're going to talk about this morning. I want to talk about a 7-step process on how to set a goal and to actually achieve it. I want to share with you a story. I think most of you have probably not heard the story because I scanned the list of participants this morning. Some of you have heard the story, and that's okay because this is a great story and it's worth repeating. But I'm a student of history. I'm not a very good student of history, but I am a student of history and I love history. The era that I enjoy most is probably World War II and the Cold War. So at the end of World War II, of course, the United States and our allies won the war. Japan found themselves on the losing side of the war. And in fact, at the end of the war, their country was decimated because the United States had dropped a couple of atomic bombs on their nation, on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They were absolutely decimated. I mean, their industry was decimated, their male population was decimated, the morale of the country was decimated. They were in horrible shape by all accounts. They had been forced to surrender as a result of the bombs being dropped. Japan was not in a good situation. I mean, things couldn't get much worse. And as a result, here they found themselves, a previously proud nation, basically financially destitute and mentally and emotionally bankrupt. And they looked at their situation and thought, you know what, there's no place but up from here because it can't get any worse. They really sat down and they asked the question that I posed to you, which is, what are we no longer willing to accept? Well, they weren't willing to accept their circumstances. They knew and they absolutely wanted to have those things change. So the Japanese government and private sector got together and they started to focus on what they were going to accomplish. They had to get things going. They had to get the economy going. They had to get the people back to work. They had to rebuild their nation, both mentally and emotionally and physically. They had to get infrastructure back in place, roads and bridges and factories, and start to support their great nation. So they came up with a goal. In 1950, they decided that they were going to become the #1 producer of textiles, in other words, fabrics, in the world. Now, talk about audacity, talk about confidence, to having gone from being defeated in the war and absolutely being decimated to having all of your factories destroyed and your modes of transportation. And then on top of that, to be mentally and emotionally defeated. And to just a few short years later, in 1950, when the war ended in 1945, to have the confidence to say, we're going to become #1 at something in the world, in manufacturing, textiles. Well, what is interesting is by the end of the 1950s, 1959, Japan had become the #1 producer of textiles in the world. So they sat down again. They thought, well, if we can do that within less than 10 years, let's set our sights on something else. So they basically asked themselves the questions: what do we want? What do we want to accomplish? What is our goal? So they set a goal of becoming the #1 producer of steel in the world, which is interesting. The #1 producer of steel in the world at the time was the United States, and Great Britain was not close behind. They kind of battled for first place. What is interesting is that Japan decided that they wanted to become the #1 producer of steel in the world. And Japan is an island nation, which we all know. What some of you may not know is that Japan has basically none of the two primary components of what it takes to make steel. Number one, if you're going to make steel, you have to have a lot of coal, because back in the day when they manufactured steel, they used coal-fired plants in order to do that. Well, Japan had no coal. So Japan would have to ship in all the coal to make that happen. To make matters worse, in order to manufacture steel, they would have to have the iron ore. They have to have the iron ore to melt down to then mix with other metals to create steel. Well, they didn't have that either. So here's Japan, this country that just 10 years before, a little over 10 years before, had been decimated in war, decides that they're going to become the #1 producer of steel in the world. And on top of that, they don't even have any coal or iron ore. They had to ship that in. What is interesting is, guys and gals, by the end of the 1960s, Japan had become the #1 producer of steel in the world. I find it so fascinating. They set their sights on it, they set their goals, and then they went about doing what it took to make it happen. Now, the story doesn't stop there. It gets more interesting. Japan looked at it and said, well, if we were able to become the #1 producer of textiles, and then we were able to become the #1 producer of steel, they were looking at what those countries who were buying the steel were doing with it. The #1 importers of steel in the world at the time were, you guessed it, the United States and England. And Japan looked at what specifically the United States was doing with the steel that they were importing from Japan, and they recognized something. They said, what is interesting is that they're taking our steel and they're turning it into a more refined product that they make even more money on. And that was automobiles. So Japan, at the end of the 1960s, around 1970, said, you know what? We're going to become the #1 producer of automobiles in the world. Now, if any of you are old enough to remember the 1970s with the oil embargo and everything that was going on there, it was perfect timing, because Japan came along, began to manufacture cars that got far better gas mileage than the automobiles that the United States, that GM, Chrysler, and Ford were making. It was perfect timing. So they started to manufacture these high efficiency vehicles that were much less expensive. And of course, their sales exploded. And by the end of the 1970s, they had nearly put Chrysler out of business. In fact, those of you who are old enough to remember, Chrysler with Lee Iacocca had to go to the United States government for a bailout. And but for that bailout, Chrysler would not exist today. What is interesting is by the end of the 1970s, Japan had become the #1 producer of automobiles in the world. Well, Japan didn't stop there. They said, what's the next wave? Where should we be putting our energy and efforts? Where should we be investing our capital? And they had this idea: we're going to invest in and become the #1 producer of electronics in the world. Now, I don't think I need to tell you that they were successful. They were. So what is interesting, that time after time, textiles, steel, automobiles, and electronics, they set their sights on it and they achieved it. The question is how? How is it that they were so consistent at setting goals and achieving them decade after decade after decade? Well, the answer is this: they followed a formula. Success has rules. See, guys and gals, any successful person just simply follows a pattern of behavior, really a formula. That's all you have to do. So whether you're looking at your relationships or your health or your business, if you'll just identify what the patterns are and stick to those patterns, you'll be successful. I always say this: if you will identify a set of patterns or behaviors that you have to engage in and do that 80% of the time, you'll get 100% of what you want long term, which you will, which I think is a cool ratio. Put in 80% and get back 100% or more. I think that's a great relationship. 20% return on your time, your energy, your efforts, your money. That's fantastic. You can't ask better for that long term. 80% of your time spent doing what you should be doing 100% of the time, and you still get 100% of your results. So let me share with you a 7-step goal setting and achievement process that I promise you, if you will follow it, it will work. It's not written anywhere that it won't work for anybody based upon who they are. It's based upon whether or not you're going to leverage the formula. See, if I said 100 times 10, you'd know the answer. It's 1,000. If I said 5 times 5, you'd say 25. If I said 4 times 4, you'd say 16. The reason you know the answer is because you understand the formula. Now, if you understood the formula, but you violated the formula, you wouldn't get the results that you want. Remember, success has rules. You have to follow the formula. So here's a 7-step process for setting and achieving a goal. And we're going to get into some detail in a few of the categories here, but not necessarily on all of them. So the first thing is this: number one, when it comes to achieving anything in life, first of all, you have to identify specifically what it is that you want and write it down. And I really encourage you, man, take notes on this. I know this is recorded, but it'll be, I think, very important if you've got a journal, which you all should have since we did our 10-10, to write this 7-step process down. Number one is to simply identify what is it that I want and be very specific with that and write it down. You know, a lot of people will say, someday I would like to have, or I would like to do, or someday I will be. When they say that, I can tell you at that point, my confidence that they're actually going to do that is next to zero. And the reason for that is the way in which they say it, the way they start that. Someday I will be, or I want, or I will have. Look, guys and gals, someday never comes. You've got to be very specific about what it is that you want. Okay? So let me be clear about this. When you say, for example, that you want to live in a nicer home, it's not enough to say that you want to live in a nicer home. It's not enough for you to say, well, I'd like to be able to take my families on vacations every year, or a big vacation every year. See, that's not enough. What you have to do is specify, this year, I'm going to take my family to a trip on a trip in Europe, and we're going to be there for 14 days. We're going to fly there on Delta, and we're going to fly into France, and we're going to stay in France for 7 days, and then we're going to go into Germany for 3 days, and then we're going to go into Austria for a couple of days, and then with the remaining days that we have, we're going to go into London and spend some time there, and then from there we'll fly back home. And while we're there, these are the things we are going to do. See, when somebody tells me that they're going to take their family on a trip, but they don't know when or where or what they're going to do specifically, it tells me that they really aren't serious about making it happen. But when somebody tells me that they're going to go on a trip and they give me detail like I just gave you with even more detail, I have high confidence that they're actually going to do it. So, man, I don't care what category it is, whether it's your relationships, your health, or your business. Identify what it is specifically that you want. If we're talking business, don't say that you want to earn more money. Identify specifically the number that you want to earn. And let me go a little step deeper into that. When you say that you want to earn more money, you say, well, I've identified the number. I want it to be $250,000. I would question this. How did you come up with that $250,000? Did it seem like a nice round number? Was it a little bit more than what you did last year? Or it was a number that somebody suggested to you and said, man, I know you can do it? See, if that's the way you arrived at it, I'm telling you, that's not a good number. It's not specific enough. The number has to be derived based upon what you want your life to look like and the amount of money it would take to live that life. The type of home that you want to be in, specifically the neighborhood, the square footage, what it would cost to own that home, both for the mortgage and the taxes and the insurance and the maintenance. Well, it would cost me X number of dollars per month. And you would have to identify all the things in your life, your household budget, your cars, and everything that it would take to maintain your household on a monthly basis, multiply that by 12, and whatever that number is, That's the number that you should say you want to make on an annual basis. Now I know that you've been specific. The word that you're going to hear me use over and over again is specific or specificity. You have got to get detailed in what it is that you say that you want. So step number one is to identify what you want with specificity, or to be specific, and write it down. You've got to write it down. Writing it down takes the first step of making it more than just an idea. It takes an idea that's in your mind and it transforms it into something that is now physical. It is written down. Not only can you see it, but others can see it. You can show it to them and say, see, this is what I'm going to do. That is truly the first step of making something a reality. The second thing is this in the 7-step process. It is identifying when you want to achieve it and writing that down. See, if somebody tells me that they want to live in a really nice home, and they've even specified all of the great features and benefits and where it's going to be located, but they haven't identified the date upon which they're going to be moving into that house, I'm telling you, I have next to zero confidence that it's going to happen. I don't care if the timeline is a year, 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, I don't care, but identify what the timeline is. It's very critical because see, each time we take the step of identifying what we want and when we want it, we get that much closer to that thing happening. See, most people will not go to the point of actually identifying with specificity what it is that they want and when they're going to get it, because that's when things start to get real. See, that's when you realize, oh crap, I guess I really have to do something about this. I have to change my patterns of behavior. I can't keep doing what I've always done, because if I keep doing what I've always done, I'm just going to get what I have right now, which is not what I want. I want this house. I want this car. I want this lifestyle. I want this amount of money in the bank. I want to be able to take additional dollars and donate those monies or my time to people and charities who need it. Whatever you want to do. See, it's important that we identify what we want and when we want it so that we can help it mature. It's about really taking an egg, for example, which is this idea, and incubating it. You know, I don't want you sitting on anything, but I just want you to incubate this idea. Well, the way to incubate an idea is to get specific about it, to write it down, identify when you want to achieve it, right? That helps it mature to take the next step to point number 3. Once you've identified what you want and when you want it, your mind will naturally take you to this 3rd step. I want you to think about this. What is going to get in the way? What would prevent me from achieving this specific goal by this specific date? It is such a critical question. What we know is this: whatever it is that we say that we want, if we've never had it before, it's going to be what? Difficult. It's going to be difficult. If we're going to go on a pathway that we've never been before, doing things that we've never done before, working to accomplish something or things we've never accomplished before, it's going to be difficult. In other words, things are going to get in the way. We have our current set of behaviors and beliefs. In other words, our patterns, our mental, emotional, physical patterns, the things that we do every day, that's going to get in the way. We have to change those things. But there are going to be other things that are going to get in the way. We've got to identify what's going to get in the way. There are going to be external forces that are going to get in the way. The economy, pandemics, unfortunately, riots and strife and all sorts of things are going to impact your goal and the process of actually achieving it. So I want you to consider what could get in the way. The reason for that is step number 4. See, the thing that distinguishes the extraordinary person from the ordinary or average person is this. The average or ordinary person will always focus on their challenges and always default to commiserating and complaining and justifying that they're not achieving what they want because of all of these challenges, and most of them external. The extraordinary person simply shifts their focus from the challenges to the solutions, and they work to actually execute on the solutions, because see, they identified, these are my challenges, these are my anticipated challenges, and these are my expected solutions. These are the things that I'm going to do to overcome those challenges. Some of them I know they're going to be there regardless, You know, my patterns of behavior, I have a tendency to do this and I need to change that. I got to stop that behavior. For example, I have a tendency to not prospect. I got to change that behavior. Well, what's the solution to that? Well, I need some accountability. I need people to hold me accountable. I need to sign some contracts that state that this is what I'm going to do. And if I don't, these will be the repercussions. This will be the price that I pay. Okay. Whatever the challenge is, identifying what the solution is to overcome that. And then step number 5, which I love, because this is where it starts to get even real. Can you feel this idea that you have, this goal, that it's maturing? You're actually just simply by sitting down and writing these things out with specificity, getting really specific, that you're actually getting closer. You're legitimately getting closer to that thing being a reality. So step number 5 is actually putting together a plan. And really the plan is manifested or shown in this. So when you write down the word plan next to it, I want you to write in parentheses, but in bold words, underline it, circle it, put stars around it, daily schedule. Daily schedule. It is absolutely critical that you put together a daily schedule that is basically a day-to-day, step-by-step approach to your plan. In other words, the things that you've said that you have to do in order to achieve the goal. So for example, if your goal is to earn $250,000 in real estate, and your best year previous to that was 100,000, so you've got to improve your approach by $150,000 annually. You have to identify, okay, what do I need to do differently in order to earn an additional 150,000 on a daily basis? And then you will put together a daily plan, in other words, a schedule that says, okay, these are the things that I have to improve upon. I've got to get more consistency in arriving at the office. And I've got to be more consistent at practicing my skills. I've got to be more consistent at actually prospecting, reaching out to people. And maybe I have to actually talk to more people than I did on average previously. Usually I talk to 10 people. I need to increase that to 20. Whatever that is, getting really specific about what the daily activities are, and then being held accountable to that approach. I just saw in the chat a question come through. What is number 4? So let's just go through them again. Number 1 is to identify the goal and to write it down. Number 2 is to identify the date that you want to achieve the goal and write it down. Number 3 is to identify the challenges that will get in the way. Number 4 is to identify the solutions to the challenges. And then number 5 is to put together a plan, and part of the plan is schedule. So plan and schedule are number 5, okay? So, and again, I don't care what category this is, whether it is your relationships, your health, or your business, you use the same process, the same steps. It's the same thing. It's just different language, different goals, okay? So that's step number 5, having a plan with a very specific schedule that is really a microcosm or a daily snapshot of, it's like a puzzle piece. If you were to take today's puzzle piece and tomorrow's and the next, over a period of time, you will have pieced together the entire puzzle, and there you would have your picture, okay? It's no different. A goal is just simply made up of tiny pieces. And every day, if you will do what it takes to create that piece and put it in place, at the end of a specific period of time, you'll have what it is that you say that you want. It's not magic, guys and gals. This isn't magic. Most people think, they look at people who are successful, right? And they go, man, they're lucky. Well, first of all, no, it's not luck. It's planning. Success is not luck. Now, can people who are successful be lucky? Can they be in the right place at the right time? Yes, but they put themselves there. That's not luck. They woke up. They engaged in the activity. I mean, it's like Japan. Yes, timing was right. The oil embargo was going on. There was an oil shortage. It was perfect timing that they were manufacturing cars that were fuel efficient. Now, you could say that was luck, but it wasn't, because Japan put themselves in that situation. I guess you could say that Germany was unlucky because they were continuing to manufacture cars that weren't fuel efficient. No, look, Japan wasn't lucky. They were there because, and they were successful because they planned and they were engaged in the right activities. So don't ascribe any of this to luck. It is called planning, and it's called execution. The next step is this, and it's, I would say it's probably the most critical, it's foundational, because everything that we've talked about to this point doesn't mean anything if you don't put in place this, what I call cornerstone. It's a question. Why are you going to do it? Why are you going to achieve the goal, whatever it is? Why are you going to improve that relationship or create that relationship? Why are you going to improve your physical health? No, not what are you going to improve in your physical health, but why are you going to do it? Why does it matter? I mean, we can come up with all sorts of logical reasons as to why it matters to be in better physical condition, for example, or to improve our mental health, to have a better mindset. But that's not the question I'm asking. The question of why would you do this is really about a deep-seated emotional thing. It's an emotion-based question. Why would you do it? I want you to remember something. People of passion are people who change the world. People of passion are people who live their dreams. People of passion achieve their goals. See, the average person who doesn't live their passions, they hate their job. 75% of people who are polled say they hate their job. That's so interesting to me. They could change that. They don't. 75% of people hate the job and they continue to show up and do the same thing over and over every day. What is interesting is successful people, people who are highly successful and are paid exceptionally well at what it is that they do, 75% of those people say they love their job. Now you might say, well, that's easy for them to say. I mean, man, if they're successful and they're making a lot of money, who wouldn't love that job? It didn't start out that way, guys and gals. Rick says he loves his job. Rick, and that's why you got it. My man, I love it. Look, people who love their jobs not because they make a lot of money. People who love their jobs find themselves doing the things that they love to do. And so therefore they make a lot of money doing it. Did you hear what I said? People who are doing what they love to do make a lot of money because they're doing what they love to do. They don't love to do what they're doing because they make a lot of money. It doesn't work that way. I'm just telling you, it doesn't. There may be some exceptions where there's some people who absolutely hate their job and they make a lot of money and they love the money, but they don't love their job. I'm just telling you. You've got to identify why it is that you would do any of these things that you say that you want to achieve. It has to be a deep-seated, emotion-based conversation. Because if you don't identify why you will do this, your willpower or whatever it is that you're going to rely upon will absolutely not carry you to the finish line, to the end zone. It's not going to happen. You will give up at some point. You will mentally and emotionally and physically just decide to give up. It's been proven over and over again. And people prove that consistently every year with their New Year's resolution. It's that less than 10% who achieve their goals that we have to look at. And I'm telling you, those are people of passion. It is an emotion-based decision. They are driven by their love, by their passion, and they're not pushed and chased by their fears. You have got to figure out why you're going to want these things. And it usually comes down to people. I saw somebody, and it may have been Matthew, but one of you said, I love to help people. Okay, that's great. And I think that's perfect. That's a great answer. And yet, Matthew, or whoever said it, I challenge you to get more specific. It's not enough to say, I want to help people. Remember, I want you, guys and gals, I want you to write this word down 100 times today and write it all around this conversation in margins. Specific, 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 specific. Be specific. It's not specific enough. When you say you want to help people, I get it, but who do you want to help? When you got up today and you said, I want to help people, that's great, but who are people? Buyers and sellers, great. Be more specific. Which buyers and sellers? Do you have a list of buyers and sellers? If you don't, can you create one? You know, I want to help buyers and sellers in this neighborhood. I want to help sellers in this specific neighborhood. You know, in this eighth of a mile or quarter of a mile radius. I'm going to go out and talk to those people. These are the people I'm going to help today. It is not enough to say I want to help people. Get specific. And that's true in any arena. When you say, I want to get in better physical health, that doesn't mean anything. When you say you want to get in better physical health, identify that. Come up with a very specific goal of a weight or a body mass index or a body fat percentage. Get specific and then describe what you will look like, what you will feel like as a result of those numbers and that state of being, that physical state of being. Guys and gals, this idea of being specific is really important to this concept of number 6, which is why. See, if you don't identify why and connect with that why on an emotional level, you will not do the work to achieve the goal, because it's going to be difficult. Think about it. You're asking yourself to do things you've never done before, to trot on a pathway you have never been on before. That is going to be scary. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be disappointing. There are going to be unexpected turns and twists and roadblocks. It's not going to be easy. And you cannot just simply rely upon this idea that, well, I've committed to it. No. Why have you committed to it? What is the emotion-based level conversation with yourself? And remind yourself every single day, this or these are the reasons why I'm going to do this. It's got to be emotion-based. If it's not, you're not going to do it. It cannot be based upon your intellect and reasoning and common sense. It's got to be based upon heart and passion. Now, having said that, step number 7, it's an easy one. We won't necessarily spend any time on this, but it's absolutely necessary. If you would, just write down the word Nike, N-I-K-E, Nike. And does anybody know what that means? Nike. Come on, somebody in the chat, tell me what that means. Nobody? Nike? It means just do it. It means you got to take action. You got to stop talking, and now you have to start doing. Look, guys and gals, let's finish with this idea, and then we'll do the closing affirmations. I asked an agent a couple of weeks ago, I asked them, I said, so why are you doing what you're doing? That's right, Alan, it's just do it. Why are you doing what you're doing? And they looked at me a little confused as, well, what do you mean? I mean, I'm doing it to make some money. You know, I got to provide for my family. And they went through and said, you know, I mean, if you want to know specifically, I've got a house payment, a car payment, and so forth and so on. And I listened to them and I said, and therein lies the problem. See, the challenge is if you're doing it just to survive, because you got to provide a house, you got to provide a car, you got to provide some money for groceries, that's not enough. See, that's called survival mode. See, if you're doing things just to survive, you'll never do the things that are necessary to thrive. I want you to listen to what I just said. See, if you're waking up every day just to survive, you'll never do what it takes to thrive. So you better figure out why it is that you're going to do these things. What are you no longer willing to accept in your life? What absolutely has to change? And then go through this process of identifying specifically what you want, the date upon which you want it, what the challenges are going to be, what the solutions are to those challenges, what your plan is, and the daily schedule that you'll have to follow. And if you'll follow that, you'll achieve your goal, no question about it. And identify every day on an emotion-based level why you're going to do it. And you're going to change your patterns of behavior, doing things you've never done before, but you're going to do it because of those emotion-based reasons. And then you're simply every day going to do it. You're just going to take action. So let's finish this up for some closing affirmations. I hope this has been a helpful conversation. I'm telling you, that is a formula, and it is a pattern. It is a process that if you will go through it and you will implement that on every one of your goals, your chances of achieving your goals go up exponentially. You too can be extraordinary. There's no reason you can't. So go make it happen.